What's good, YouTube? It's your boy, Blueblood Sports TV, back at y'all with another one. So, we know this past week we got some great news when it comes to the sport of boxing, as the WBO, World Boxing Organization, has ordered that 3-division world champion, undefeated, former junior welterweight undisputed world champion, who was the WBO welterweight world champion, Terence Crawford, superstar boxer, must face 2-time welterweight world champion, superstar boxer Showtime Shawn Porter, and they must come to an agreement within the next 30 days, or the fight is going to go to a purse bid, and Terence Crawford will see 60-40% being in his favor. He'll get 60%, Shawn Porter get 40%. With that said, Terence Crawford, 37 wins, no losses, no draws, 27 big wins by way of knockout. He is 33 years of age, stands at 5'8" with a 74-inch arm reach. Shawn Porter will be the toughest test in Terence Crawford's career. Terence Crawford is widely considered by many to be the #1 pound-for-pound best boxer in the world, but he hasn't had, that legacy, high-profile, defining fight in his career yet. Now, some of his opponents have been very, very good opponents. You talk about the likes of 3-division world champion, former Olympic gold medalist Yuriorkis Gamboa, when he was undefeated. Victor Postol, when Victor Postol was seen as the boogeyman in junior welterweight. So he's faced some very, very good opponents. Thomas Delorme, Hammer and Hank Lundy, Felix Diaz. He's faced some very, very good opponents. Shawn Porter, 33 years of age, 31 wins, 3 losses, 1 draw, 17 wins by way of knockout. Shawn Porter stands at 5'7" with a 69-inch arm reach. Shawn Porter is a different style of a fighter. He's a completely different animal when it comes to Terence Crawford's opponents. He's stronger. Now, in stature, he's at 5'6", 5'7", 69-inch arm reach. So in stature, he's not the biggest guy Terence Crawford's faced, obviously. But he's going to be the best version of any boxer Terence Crawford has ever faced. His high ring IQ, his athletic ability, his activeness, his footwork. He's arguably the best footwork, I believe. I personally say that Shawn Porter has the best footwork in boxing, okay? So he's going to give him angles. Shawn Porter lacks in power. He's accurate with his punches. He's very active in the fight, but he lacks power, punching power, okay? And so that's his glaring weakness. Everything else, there is no weakness when it comes to Shawn Porter. With that said, again, this is the biggest fight in Terence Crawford's career. It's not so much of the biggest fight in Shawn Porter's career. It's a very big fight for Shawn Porter, but this is the biggest fight. Shawn Porter faced Errol Spence. Shawn Porter has faced some very, very great opponents, world champions. This would be one of the biggest fights, but he fought Keith Thurman. He fought Danny Garcia. He fought Errol Spence on the big stage. So can't say it's the biggest fight of his career. It may be the most important fight of his career, because this could very well be Shawn Porter's last opportunity at a world title, okay? Especially depending upon if he loses the fight, how he loses the fight. With that said, neither guy is known to be very big superstars outside of the sport of boxing, okay? They're superstars within the sport of boxing, not so much outside the sport of boxing. With that said, we know that, legendary promoter, top-ranked CEO and promoter Bob Arum, who promotes Terence Crawford, the longtime promoter of Terence Crawford. Bob Arum doesn't hold this fight in high regards when it comes to revenue. He does not believe that, this is a fight, that's a high revenue fight. Bob Arum is on record currently right now stating that he's not sure. He believes it'll do solid pay-per-view numbers as a pay-per-view event, but he's not sure exactly what they'll get a return on their investment, okay? So he stated that he doesn't want to let this fight go to a purse bid, because I believe Bob Arum feels like he'll get outbid. Bob Arum stated that the fact that the WBO has put it out there that Terence Crawford would get 60% of a 100% revenue, percentage, should it go to a purse bid. Bob Arum says he's going to use that in the negotiations as leverage when dealing with Shawn Porter, his father, trainer, and manager, Kenny Porter, and advisor, PBC Premier Boxing Champions founder and advisor, Al Heyman. So he says he's going to use that as leverage to negotiate, because he knows that they know that if it goes to a purse bid, Terence Crawford is going to get obviously the largest share of the pie at 60%. So he believes they could work something out. Terence Crawford obviously is the A side, undefeated. He's the belt holder. So he's clearly the A side, no doubt about that. But Bob Arum, he's not in the belief that it's a guarantee this fight will do big pay-per-view numbers. Obviously, it's going to be a pay-per-view event, because that's the way they're going to recoup their money for the guaranteed purses. Bob Arum's on record as stating that he would give Shawn Porter $1 million to $2 million with incentives. Shawn Porter obviously liking his worth to more than that. He got close to that amount when he fought Sebastian Famila in a low-profile fight. A high-profile championship fight with Terence Crawford should garner Shawn Porter to see far more money, and that's what Shawn Porter standing on the square and stating that that's what he believes he should get, and rightfully so. With that said, Bob Arum, he's not sure if it's a pay-per-view event, so I wanted to weigh in on that. We know Bob Arum, he stated that Terence Crawford is a superstar inside the ring. He's not a superstar outside the ring in his brand, okay? So he's not a big draw. Terence Crawford has done, 2 pay-per-view events, and they weren't successful according to Bob Arum. He said that they were lackluster. Bob Arum stated that he lost more money on Terence Crawford, so much so that he could build a mansion in Beverly Hills from scratch. So we know that Bob Arum is not high on Terence Crawford as being a major brand or a big draw, a big seller outside the ring. So Bob Arum, not sure that Terence Crawford, he reported that Terence Crawford did $50,000 with Victor Postile. That was a pay-per-view unification showdown. And then Terence Crawford did $150,000 with Amir Khan. Okay, so that's a combined $210,000 pay-per-views. Shawn Porter doesn't have the biggest brand outside of the sport of boxing, but he's definitely a superstar in the sport of boxing. Now, Shawn Porter, he did 325,000 pay-per-view buys with Errol Spence Jr., who's the biggest rival to Terence Crawford, undefeated, unified WBC, IBF, welterweight world champion, superstar boxer, who's widely considered to be top 3 best pound-for-pound fighters in the world, if not number 1, depending upon who you ask. So, with that said, Errol Spence has a bigger brand than Shawn Porter and Terence Crawford, and Errol Spence has done a major pay-per-view his last 3 outings, okay? He did 350,000 pay-per-view buys with 4-division world champion Mexican superstar boxer Mikey Garcia. I just gave you the numbers with him and Shawn Porter, 325,000 pay-per-view buys and 310 to 315,000 pay-per-view buys in his last fight with 2-division world champion superstar boxer Danny Swift Garcia. So, Shawn Porter and Errol Spence have done bigger numbers than Danny Garcia and Danny Garcia and Errol Spence, and some would argue that Danny Garcia is a bigger star in the sport of boxing than Shawn Porter. Well, the numbers show, although the fight with Shawn Porter and Errol Spence was a unification bout, Danny Garcia was just a defense. Maybe that was the difference, but Shawn Porter attracted more eyes to the Errol Spence fight, more interesting than Danny Garcia did. And the intrigue for Danny Garcia fight should have been even higher, because Danny Garcia and Errol Spence fight was Errol Spence's first fight coming off of suffering that horrific car accident and being out the ring for 14 months. And the intrigue and the interest to see how Errol Spence was going to come back was very, very high. So for it to do less numbers than Shawn Porter is very interesting. Okay, now obviously Errol Spence is going into a major fight with legendary 8-division world champion, iconic Filipino superstar boxer Manny Patman Pacquiao, August 21st, T-Mobile Arena, Las Vegas, Nevada. With that said, the intrigue and the interest you would think would be higher than the Shawn Porter, but it wasn't. So does that mean that Shawn Porter his star power is underestimated? Shawn Porter, he did a lot of views. He did 1.7 million views when he fought Sebastian Famila on free TV. Terence Crawford fought IBF former welterweight world champion, British superstar boxer Special K. Kell Brook, and he did 2 million 2 million free views on ESPN, on the largest sporting platform in the world, on ESPN. Okay, so one can argue from that standpoint that Shawn Porter is a bigger draw than Terence Crawford. Okay, because we know he accounted for 15,000 pay-per-view buys more than Danny Garcia. And when you put him on free TV on Fox, on a smaller platform, on a smaller network than a sporting network, than ESPN. ESPN is the worldwide leader in sports, the biggest sporting platform in the world. And when you put Terence Crawford in a high-profile fight against a guy that is considered to be a bigger star than Shawn Porter and Kell Brook, and has a country behind him in the UK who supports boxing, and they only do 300,000 more free views than Shawn Porter in a low-profile fight against a guy that's unknown, to say the least, in Sebastian Famila, and he does 1.7 million views. And Terence Crawford in a high-profile fight on the biggest sporting platform in the world, on ESPN, only does 2 million views. Well, doesn't that beg the question that maybe Shawn Porter is the biggest star? His brand is arguably bigger than Terence Crawford. So can Shawn Porter's star power, the intrigue to see how Terence Crawford does with a guy in the style and his biggest welterweight fight, I don't want to say his biggest fight. It is definitely the biggest fight of his career, but for sure it's the biggest welterweight fight of his career, because one could argue he fought Julius Indongo for Undisputed. That may have been the biggest fight of his career thus far, accomplishment-wise, okay? But just legacy-wise, this Shawn Porter fight has to be on the same level, if not bigger, okay? And again, can Shawn Porter's star power carry it over 200,000 pay-per-view buys? Because we know Terence Crawford with Amir Khan did 150,000. So can Shawn Porter and his star power bring it over 200,000 pay-per-view buys, which would definitely be considered a success, because we have undefeated 3-division world champion superstar boxer who simultaneously holds the WBA regular title at 135 and 140, and he's also the WBA super champion at 130. That's Gervonta Tank Davis, superstar boxer. Okay, Gervonta Tank Davis, according to reports, he did 215,000 pay-per-view buys his last fight against Mario Barrios, and that was seen as a success. So he's seen as a superstar. So if we look at Gervonta Tank Davis as a superstar doing a little over 200,000 pay-per-view buys, but we don't view Terence Crawford's star power in the same light as Gervonta Tank Davis's star power at 150,000 pay-per-view buys, well, there's something not adding up there. So now, if we say Gervonta Tank Davis is a superstar in the sport of boxing, and he's a pay-per-view star in the sport of boxing, and he did 200,000 pay-per-view buys, well, is it safe to say that Shawn Porter can get Terence Crawford another 60,000 pay-per-view buys? And the intrigue for this fight, the interest for this fight, can get this over another 60,000, and I'm talking about 60,000 compared to the 150,000, okay? Because Amir Khan, yeah, he brought in, he's an attraction, he's a big name, but Amir Khan was seen past it. So how much did Amir Khan actually contribute to that 150,000 pay-per-view buys, okay? Well, one could say a whole lot, because Terence Crawford fought Victor Postol and only brought in 50,000. Well, Terence Crawford wasn't the star he is today when he fought Victor Postol, and I believe his star power is bigger than when he fought Amir Khan. He's knocked out his last 6 opponents, including Amir Khan. So I believe his star power has grown, and the fact that the promotion for this fight, and the fact that Terence Crawford had been seen to now at this point in time been void of these big fights and not being able to secure it, and some would say he's avoiding them, he's ducking these fighters, and things of that nature. Shawn Porter's style is never boring. He's never in a boring fight. I believe that this fight can do over 200,000 pay-per-view buys. And at that point in time, we have to view it as a success. If we view Gervonta Tank Davis as a successful pay-per-view star, this fight can get over 200,000 pay-per-views, I believe, when you match these two together at the height of their career, because both are in their primes. Shawn Porter's never been blown out in any fight. He's lost, but he's never been blown out in any fight. He lost to Kell Brook, he lost to Errol Spence, and he lost to Keith Thurman, but they were all slim margin losses. So he's never been blown out in any fight, and he's never been in a boring fight. So can Shawn Porter get this fight over another 60,000? I believe he can. And I believe that this would be a success. Now, I'm favoring Terence Crawford to win the fight because I believe that he has more power, no doubt. And he's just more versatile than Shawn Porter. I believe he has just more tools in the toolbox that can garner him to make the necessary adjustments. Now, the intrigue comes from, can he actually make the adjustments? Because Shawn Porter is going to make you fight his fight. He's going to press you every second of every minute of every round, okay? Shawn Porter's not going to give you a break. Shawn Porter's going to be in your chest. He's going to smother your punches. He's going to even smother his punches. He's going to be very aggressive. He's very calculated. He's very strong, and he's very athletic. So the intrigue comes from, can Terence Crawford actually make the adjustments? Can he prove that he belongs on this stage? And I believe that the fact that Terence Crawford has a lot to prove in this fight, and I believe that the fact that Shawn Porter could be in his last opportunity on the biggest stage, on the big stage, I believe that we're going to get the best version of Terence Crawford, and you're going to get the best version of Shawn Porter, and the rubber's going to meet the road. And at that very moment, I believe that we're going to get a very exciting fight, possibly, arguably, in my opinion, I believe it's going to for sure deliver as the fight of the year. So with that said, their star power is high enough that it's going to do over 200,000 pay-per-view buys. I expect it to do about 260,000 pay-per-view buys successfully. I believe that this fight is going to do 200 to 260,000 pay-per-view buys. Now we know Terence Crawford, obviously, he makes for one half of the biggest fight in the sport of boxing, which is the fight that everybody wants to see, is him and Errol Spence Jr. Is this enough to catapult Terence Crawford to garner 50-50 split with Errol Spence, or does Errol Spence still stand on his square and say 60-40 in my favor? Because now Errol Spence is going into a fight with Manny Pacquiao, and no doubt that's going to do well above 350,000 pay-per-views. I believe actually it's going to do 500,000 to 700,000 pay-per-views. So once again, Errol Spence is going to be, showing off his star power and his success. And at that point in time, although Terence Crawford, I believe, is going to be a successful pay-per-view with Shawn Porter, you can argue that he's still not a bigger star than Errol Spence Jr., and it doesn't deserve to be 50-50. But a part of me feels like Errol Spence will take 50-50 because Errol Spence has a point to prove. So we got to see how this unfolds and plays out. But Errol Spence beats Manny Pacquiao in dramatic fashion and does another major successful pay-per-view. He's well in his right to ask for and demand for a 60-40 split from Terence Crawford, which is not, which is not asking too much, because the accomplishments of Shawn Porter still gives Shawn Porter a 60-40 split with Terence Crawford. Shawn Porter has done one pay-per-view against Errol Spence and it was successful, and he still, that garners him to get 60-40 split. So Terence Crawford 60-40 is not, far-fetched. So we got to see how that will play out. But in my opinion, I believe that Bob Arum may be understating and underestimating the star power of Terence Crawford and Shawn Porter currently as it stands right now. Those pay-per-views Terence Crawford did was some years ago, and I believe his star power has risen since then, and I believe Shawn Porter's growth and stock has went up since the Errol Spence fight. We haven't seen Shawn Porter in a high-profile fight since the Errol Spence fight. He fought Sebastian Famila, but then we went through the pandemic and everything was suspended. So his star power and his stock has risen since the Errol Spence fight, because most people expected Shawn Porter to get blown out in that fight against Errol Spence, and it was anything but that. So I believe his star power is at his highest of his career, and I believe that he'll be successful against Terence Crawford. I believe it'll definitely do well over 250,000 pay-per-view buys. So it looks like the date is going to be in November. I'm suspecting it's going to be the middle of November, and I can't wait. So make sure you smash the like button, hit the like button, drop a comment in the comment section. Let me know what y'all think. Y'all already know what it is. It's your boy Blue Blood Sports TV. Hate, like, comment, and subscribe. You haven't subscribed, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, hit the bell icon to get all the new notifications. Follow me on Instagram at Blue Blood Sports TV, all one word. Y'all already know what it is. Shout out to the entire LDBC. Shout out to New Media. Shout out to Black Media Row. Make sure you like and share these videos. That's all I got for y'all. Peace.
You're watching Blue Blood Sports TV. Wow.